Alberta Primetime with Michael Higgins.
Welcome to Alberta Primetime. Ahead tonight, paramedics and the shift to Acute Care Alberta. But first, from Mark Carney taking control to marking a COVID anniversary, brazen statue thefts, and the elbows up rally cry. Let's kick off the program with our Primetime This Week panel. And joining us this evening, Alex Boyd, Alberta-based national reporter for the Toronto Star, and Tom Keenan, professor in the School of Architecture, Planning and Landscape at the University of Calgary, of course, also the author of Techno Creep. Good evening to you both, and let's begin in the nation's capital.
I, Mark Carney, do solemnly and sincerely promise and swear that I will truly and faithfully, and to the best of my skill and knowledge, execute the powers and trust reposed in me as Prime Minister.
Mark Carney being sworn in at Rideau Hall this morning, the new Prime Minister also unveiling the cabinet that will carry his government into the much-anticipated election.
First, protecting Canadian workers and their families in the face of unjustified foreign trade actions. And second, growing this great country by putting more money in Canadians' pockets, by ensuring that government spends less so Canada can invest more.
The Carney cabinet considerably smaller than the version Justin Trudeau left him. And as for the outgoing Prime Minister, he posted a final message Thursday captioned, "Hey Canada, one last thing."
I am so proud of Canadians. I'm proud to have served a country full of people who stand up for what's right, rise to every occasion, and always have each other's backs when it matters most. This may be my last day here in this office, but I will always be boldly and unapologetically Canadian. My only ask is that no matter what the world throws at us, you always be the same.
Trudeau made his resignation official this morning in meeting with the Governor General ahead of swearing-in ceremonies. Alex, let's start on the arrival of the Carney government. What kind of staying power or impact do you see it having with an election looming?
I mean, regardless of what you think of the politics of Trudeau, I think it's been felt a little bit destabilizing the last few weeks, knowing that we're facing such a challenge from the United States, knowing that we're in such an unprecedented moment, but also knowing that, you know, we don't have a clear leader at the helm. So I think it's nice to have a little bit of clarity, a little bit of certainty about who's actually in charge at the moment, but emphasis on at the moment, because, you know, there's a lot of signs that suggest that we'll be going right back into an election right away. So while I think this provides a little bit of clarity, a little bit of stability, you know, it's destined to be short-lived. And we could be seeing, you know, our third prime minister potentially, you know, in a matter of months relatively soon.
And Tom, given what's being faced from south of the border, what kind of note do you feel Mark Carney will need to strike as he takes over the Prime Minister's office?
He's going to be has to be a bigger bully than the other guy, which is going to be pretty hard for him, I think. The Conservatives have an ad that shows him brilliantly. I think it's from the Jon Stewart show, and he looks really sneaky. So that's the word they're trying to brand him with. And if you look at things like moving the headquarters of Brookfield Asset Management to New York, he kind of flip-flop on that. He flip-flops on some bigger things, too. One thing I was really glad to see is that Minister Guilbeault is still in the cabinet, but he's not the environment minister. He was a kind of a thorn in a lot of people's backside, and he's moving to parks. So that's great. There's tons of trees he can hug there. And if he wants to climb, like he climbed the CN Tower, there's a couple of big mountains he can tackle.
Alex, what did you make of Justin Trudeau's goodbye video and the fact it was posted to social media as a means of speaking directly to Canadians?
I mean, it felt very Trudeau. You know, he ended as he began, you know, making it very much about his own personality, speaking very much directly to Canadians, you know, and going out on kind of a hope and optimism message. So it felt very on brand from him. So I guess not surprising to see today. I think how his legacy is negotiated kind of over the years to come is certainly going to be an interesting one.
And Tom, on that legacy point, how do you feel Justin Trudeau's time as Prime Minister will be remembered by Albertans?
On a facetious note, there are now 2 cannabis shops within walking distance of my house, and that's a legacy that's not going to change. But of course, he did a lot in terms of climate action, Indigenous reconciliation, and he accomplished quite a bit. But I think it's definitely time that we get somebody else. But we'll keep the cannabis shops. Thank you very much.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Now, it was 5 years ago this week. The World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak a global pandemic. It started with warning signs overseas, and soon Alberta saw cases ramp up.
We need to be really cautious about these numbers.
Schools, workplaces were shuttered, social gatherings banned, and grocery stores saw products flying off the shelves. And while the world has changed considerably in the years since, some Albertans continue to struggle with effects of the disease.
Long COVID definitely is being forgotten, particularly in the medical field, primarily because there is no solution.
Many long COVID clinics have been shuttered, and private care can be pricey.
And that's a shame because I think there are still lots of people that need care, lots of family physicians that want to help them get care but don't know where to start.
I think we've lost a little bit of respect for that. We no longer see overflowing in intensive care units, so we think the virus is gone.
And while weaker COVID strains remain, there are also lasting impacts outside of health, like data showing 1 in 5 Canadians work most of their hours from home. Tom, if there is one lesson we learned from the pandemic experience, what do you think that might be?
How easily it can happen and how unprepared we were. I mean, now we've got bird flu. We're just one mutation away from another pandemic. I haven't gotten rid of my supply of masks. I'm sure I'm going to need them again. So it's brought about, a major attitudinal shift, I think, in the medical community. I think we'll be a lot more ready for the next one than we were for this one.
Alex, what do you think the pandemic has permanently changed in the working world? How much of an impact has it had in the way we do our jobs?
I mean, I'm saying this now from my home office. We're having this conversation over video stream. So I do think it's kind of, forced us all to adapt to new technologies, think differently about the office, readjust how we work. And I think that's kind of led to broader conversations about, okay, well, how do we collaborate? What is the best way to have these conversations? Do you have to live in the particular city where your job used to be located, or can you live elsewhere? So I think some of those conversations have been really positive, probably long needed. To have these technological options in place has been really fantastic. I do wonder if we're, still undergoing a bit of a calibration. I think, totally giving away all of our offices, we may look back at that in the future and think, hey, maybe that wasn't, the best idea in the long term. But yeah, I think there's absolutely no question. It's really, shaken up a lot of the way we relate to each other in the workplace.
All right, time for us to take a bit of a break. But when we come back, thieves targeting statues and the phrase driving a wave of Canadian patriotism. More from our Primetime This Week panel in a moment. Welcome back. Theft is leaving a considerable scar on Alberta's cultural landscape. In a park in southwest Edmonton, little remains of a bronze statue of a child.
Awful, it's very disrespectful, and it has no sense.
It appears the statue was sawed off at the ankles, leaving only the feet behind, similar to how a statue of Emily Murphy was stolen in late February.
Really unfortunate that this is happening. I mean, this is not just happening with statues and sculptures. This is also happening with plaques, with medallions we've seen on the news as well. So obviously, this is part of something much bigger.
Well, the Arts Council says it is working with police in the city to ensure a close eye is kept on other such works of art. The artist commissioned by the city of Red Deer to create this bronze statue of Francis the Pig back in the 1990s, now working to reinforce the base after an attempted theft nearly 2 years ago.
Time is of the essence in thievery, and they won't have the time required to do the cutting, and hopefully they'll wreck their tools doing it.
Francis the Pig, by the way, captured the hearts of Red Deer residents and the nation after escaping a slaughterhouse and remaining on the run for several months. Okay, Alex, what do you feel would drive someone to brazenly hack up and make off with something as significant as a statue? What does that speak to?
Gosh, I mean, I think if you're spending your evenings in a park, like trying to saw through a pig statue, I mean, either you're very, very desperate, or you've got a whole lot of time on your hands. With respect to the Arts Council, I think I'd be curious to see some of the statistics here in terms of how prevalent this actually is. I'm not sure that we're living in an age of, rampant statue theft. But at the same time, these things are very beloved. They're obviously very visible. And so it, affects people when it happens and upsets people. So I can understand why there's definitely a concern here. But I just keep thinking of this person who, even if they do manage to saw through the statue and get it into their, vehicle, presumably, what next? Are you getting it melted down? Who is taking that? Or is it a, trophy in your basement? So, I mean, I just have a really hard time imagining that there's, a bustling market for this or a great demand for melted down statues. So, will this be hugely more widespread? Can't imagine there's that many people who are that motivated.
Well, and Tom, on that melting down point, what on earth does a thief do with a statue? How might there be value in stealing that?
Well, there are people who steal famous artworks and they know they can never sell them, but as Alex said, they keep them in their basement as a trophy. Much more mundane explanation, people have stolen electrical wires from live wires to get the scrap metal and take it to a scrapyard. I think that probably it's somebody just with a political motivation, and a strange one, maybe just like a vandalism orientation. Definitely somebody who needs some mental health counseling.
Goodness. All right. One more topic. Donald Trump's repeated attacks on Canadian sovereignty are not only driving a wave of patriotism, they've also lit a fuse under one phrase in particular, from a surge of videos on social media to merchandise of all sorts. Elbows up is everywhere, urging Canadians to take a symbolic stance against the U.S. president's threats. Well, rooted in sports, it's also now a political rallying cry.
But fight when we must, elbows up.
Because we will never kiss the gangster's ring.
My thanks to...
In its current context, the slogan first used by Canadian Mike Myers, right there, mouthed during the credits of a recent episode of Saturday Night Live, and motivating elbows up rallies in the nation's capital.
Absolutely, 100%. Elbows up.
Pass to Howard. Shot.
Aha, it's a phrase as well that can be traced back to Canadian hockey legend Gordie Howe, known not only as Mr. Hockey, but also Mr. Elbows, a player who took no guff from his opponents. Tom, how much of a flex is this when it comes to national pride, and is it likely to capture the attention of Americans?
It's very good for us, but as a born and bred New Yorker, I can tell you, we wouldn't understand it down there. If you took something from the NFL or from Major League Baseball, it might make more sense. But, at least they didn't go for something from lacrosse. Hockey is our official winter sport. Lacrosse is our official summer sport. And I don't think that would get anywhere. So the reality is that most Americans are not as concerned about this as we are. It's kind of a Canadian thing, but that's a good thing.
Alex, what does elbows up say to you about our Canadian identity and about not backing down?
I'm not from New York. I admit I had to Google elbows up. As I've said probably 37 times on this panel, I'm not a hockey person, but I think it speaks to just the fury that people are feeling right now. People are very, very angry. And I think that's the piece of this that Americans are missing. Having had conversations with a few people, personally, professionally, over the last couple of weeks, I get the sense that Americans think that the tariff conversation is kind of, a sideshow to the main, Trump policy debate, that it's something that's happening far away, not a big deal. I think they are missing that Canadians are furious, and that is a damaging, a severing potentially of a relationship that goes back a very long time. And you know what? Even if tariffs magically go away tomorrow, I don't imagine that Canadians are going to get over this immediately. And so that, I think, is the long-term impact here, that anger represented by, the elbows up thing that I think, Americans are really missing to their peril.
Yeah, well, I think Marco Rubio is kind of getting a bit of a window to that in his visit to Quebec right now. All right, folks, we're out of time. Have to leave it there. Thank you kindly. Hope you have an awesome weekend.
Thanks, Michael.
Bye, guys.